So we'll do a couple more slides with the assessment. We'll probably take a little break, so we're coming up on an hour, or a little close to an hour. But again, get them moving. Like again, the table assessment stuff, like I said, is like 5–10 minutes. And then I want to get them on the floor and see what they move. I want to see them do a squat pattern. I want to see if they can do a walking lunge, right? Again, it's a screen, so whether you're doing the functional movement, like they do the rotary stability, they do the lunge over step, they do the squat pattern, that's great. That's going to give you feedback, right? If they're 1, 2, or 3, if they're 0, if there's pain, it's a 0. You know, that's going to give you some feedback. Overhead squat, though, can they do it? To me, it's both evaluative and performance-based. So I usually set it up to where feet are going to be shoulder width apart, hands spread over the head, and I want them to squat that way first off, like that. So if they're here, you know, and they're able to do it, and that tells you that they had, and they're able to get into that deep hip flexion, that tells you they have good hip internal rotation. They need that internal rotation to get into deep hip flexion. If they don't have it, then yeah, you can open them up. I mean, I never teach somebody to squat with their feet shoulder width apart and their feet pointing straight ahead. I don't teach the squat that way. But from an evaluative standpoint, with an overhead squat, I want to see if they can do it that way. Because if they can, that tells me, okay, they got some good hip internal rotation, they're able to get into deep hip flexion without anything happening, cool. But if I'm actually teaching somebody to squat with a load on their back, I'm not having them squat this way. Like they're going to get a wider stance, they're going to out-toe a little bit, we're going to work on a hip hinge, that's going to open up the hips a little bit more. But as far as like testing an overhead squat, or the squat pattern in general during the assessment, I'm going to start this way first. And a lot of times they're going to struggle. And what are we looking for with an overhead squat? What type of stuff are we looking for? What compensation patterns are we looking for?
Classic dips.
Right. So, you know, are they leaning forward? Can they even get to depth? Are the heels coming off? Are the knees caving in? You know, all that stuff's going to give you a little bit of feedback of what's going on. Whether it's poor ankle mobility, poor T-spine, they don't have very good lat length. They can't get their hands over their head. Do they tuck under at the bottom, that little butt wing? Do they do that? Oh, I actually put that. Okay. And a lot of times too, you gotta figure if it's a mobility or stability issue, right? A lot of times people do an overhead squat, you know, they stop in their tracks. And like, oh, it's a mobility issue. Hips are locked up. No, it could be a stability issue. Like the body's just stopping itself because they perceive that as a threat. So what can we do to see if it's a mobility or stability issue with a squat? What's a simple fix or test we can do? Any idea?
Just lay them on their back.
You could do that. I mean, that's certainly the case, like, because Cosgrove talked about that, right? So he had a picture of a guy doing a squat and he couldn't even get close to depth, but lying on his back, and he got hip flexion fine. Well, another thing we do is what I like to do is hand them a 10-pound plate out front. What does that do? What's that force? It makes them to gauge their interior core. It's going to give them that stability, right? And it's that force couple of like stiffness towards the hamstrings or the hips compared to the erectors or anything. It's not a mobility issue. It's just a stability issue. Does that make sense? So that's just a simple thing I can do from a coaching standpoint. Because like, if you just do an overhead squat and they don't get to depth and you're it's a mobility issue, and you're cranking on the mobility when it was just simple core stability, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So
I had a yoga girl come in with me. I put her through the exact same thing, and she couldn't squat backwards and forward.
Yep.
As soon as I had her do that, squat perfect.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, and if I see that fixes it automatically, that's easy for me. It's okay. We're gonna hammer some planks, we're gonna hammer some pad-off presses, and we're just gonna work on core stability, and we'll be fine. But we also have to look at the ankles too. You know, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll start them flat-footed, and then if they can't get to depth, then we give them that heel lift, we give them that mechanical advantage, and then they get